This is Made in America with Neil Asbury and Rich Rothman.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. Hey, Rich, we're going to have a conversation about the State of the Union here just in a moment. But the quick observation is that it was completely uninspiring. Considering what's going on in the world and get the American people engaged and getting us together, coming together, right? So President Biden goes on and he's like bashing like more than half the country, like nonstop. And then, for a brief moment, he says, but let's all come together and let's hold hands and let's all be united. It just seems like he's just so completely out of touch. And he doesn't really want to bring us together, because that's not the way you do it.
Well, I agree, and we're going to talk about this later in the show anyway with a bunch of sound bites. We're going to kind of talk and analyze it. But I just find, one of his comments, and we're going to have this one specifically, where, let's stop using the COVID as a means of dividing the country. Well, for God's sakes, you're the one who did it. I mean, you're the one that said this is a pandemic of, non-vaccinated, and it went downhill from there. So, and that's just one of the good things he said. I mean, there are so many other things that he talked about, including the tax.
Well, he was the guy who said
breaks from Trump.
When President Trump was in office, he was the guy who said, "Well, he's not going to take Trump's vaccine." And he had the whole.
He and Harris started the whole thing. I wouldn't trust it. And I wouldn't do it.
Now they're in charge, and all of a sudden, you're a traitor for not taking it. But anyway, there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
But when you look at the president of the Ukraine, and he goes on, and you saw that his address to the European Union, right? When he applied to join the European Union, right? I mean, it was just absolutely amazing. I mean, people were in tears. I mean, about what this man was.
The interpreter
and what the leader,
from Germany couldn't interpret it. She was crying.
It was like so.
The guy's amazing. So, and he started out in stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
Well, who would think?
Yeah, I mean,
he could. I thought he'd get a job in this administration. But he's better than that.
I got to tell you, what a guy, and standing up to evil. I just wish the American president would have rose to the occasion. But anyway, lot to talk about today, Rich. We're going to have an incredible show. Great guests, great discussions, lots of things to go over. But we're going to talk right now about what's going on with interest rates, because every small business, it's just everybody in the country is really impacted by interest rates. I mean, everything that we do, everything we buy, our quality of life, everything that we aspire for somehow is going to circle back to interest and what you have available to you. And obviously inflation is taking a lot of people's hard-earned income away because of this hidden tax of inflation, and there's a lot of people out there trying to figure out what to do about it. So we're very pleased to have back with us Juan del Busto. He is the former head of the Miami Federal Reserve, and he's also the chairman of the board of Del Busto Capital Partners. Juan, welcome back to Made in America.
Thank you. My pleasure. Glad to be with you.
I just got to ask you one question before we get to a soundbite. I just got to ask you one question. And I always read quotes from the head of the Federal Reserve and say Dallas or Miami or St. Louis, wherever these offices are. But over a long period of time, I've always read a lot about the people who lead the Federal Reserves around the country. So what exactly does the head of the Miami Federal Reserve do?
Well, not only operationally, we supplied cash internationally to a lot of banks around the world. 68% of U.S. currency is abroad, not in the United States, and almost all the currency that went to Europe, South America, Central America, the Caribbean, came out of the Miami branch because of the easy access.
I never knew that.
To the airports. Yeah. We were one of the biggest branches in the country, behind head office of New York, branch in Los Angeles and Miami. We were probably the third providing U.S. currency around the country. And, of course, the major part that we did was looking at the economy of South Florida. The 13 southernmost counties by GDP was approximately the 24th largest economy in the world. So that was key, gathering economic data to provide to the FOMC to move the economy, whether we act on interest rates to keep them the same, increase, or decrease. So that was very important to get that data to formulate monetary policy.
Wow. Now, Rich, I never knew that. I'm glad I asked that question because it was bugging me. I just never knew, what was the day-to-day activity, and that makes
But you
a lot
could
of sense
also
to me.
think, now that Juan's here,
So incredibly important.
just think the position of Miami, particularly during the 80s, 90s, the early 2000s, and the money going in and out of this country for good reasons and for bad reasons, and particularly in Miami, we had a lot of flight going into South America, Latin America in general, and it was, I would think, Juan, it was, the Miami Fed probably had a ton of security going on. I mean, it had to be an amazing place to work, because look at the stories that came out of Miami, and it's all cash.
Yeah, we we did, and we had a lot of traffic also from a lot of people coming in to buy securities like T-bills, bonds directly coming into the branch. And when interest rates were really high in the 80s, we had our lobby full of people because back then you could come into the bank instead of doing it through direct electronics, come in and buy securities. And some of the people were Evel Knievel, Burt Parks, Burt Reynolds would come to the branch and buy securities directly. So among a lot of others. So that was a big part of the Federal Reserve System, and of course, once electronics came in, we did all that that way instead of having people come in directly.
Just a silly, stupid question, but I mean, do you have a warehouse full of dollars back there? I mean, is it all electronic, or do you actually have the hard paper? You have the paper there.
We do. That's how we send currency all over the world.
It's actually the actual dollars themselves, the paper currency.
Yeah, that's what we ship out of every branch in the country, but some we ship more than others. So,
but that wasn't where they shipped to. Wait. That's not where they shipped to Iran, was it? Back in the Obama days?
Confidentially, we didn't send it.
There's nobody listening. We're going to keep it a secret here.
Somehow. Some of that money didn't end up legally through legal channels, end up in places that it shouldn't have ended up, but that happens all over.
Oh, wow, absolutely.
But it was sent out, was 100% out legally to financial institutions around the world.
Well, I'm going to call them up today and see if they'll send me a 40-foot container of $100 bills.
I don't think they have an ATM. There's no ATM in that.
I'll give you an IOU. How's that? Just send me over a 40-foot container of $100 bills. Hey, but let's. This is a great segue. We want to listen to the head of the Federal Reserve, the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, and he had this to say this week. I'd like to get your comments on it.
For now, I would say that we will proceed carefully along the lines of that plan. The thing is, the economic effects of these events are highly uncertain. So far, we've seen energy prices move up further, and those increases will move through the economy and push up headline inflation, and also they're going to weigh on spending. We're seeing effects on other commodities and perhaps from declining risk sentiment and weaker growth abroad. The thing is, we can't know how large or persistent those effects will be. I do think it will be appropriate to raise our target range for the federal funds rate at the March meeting in a couple of weeks, and I'm inclined to propose and support a 25 basis point rate hike.
So, Juan, what do you think? I mean, a lot of people out there say that the Feds just waited too long to do anything.
They were asleep. I think he should have said that a year and a half ago. Absolutely. I sat on our board locally where we would vote on increasing, decreasing, or maintaining interest rates for 26 years. The last 17 years I was there, and I retired 12. So it's been 10 years. Once inflation got to 2%, we moved. And he, with the COVID, said that we would extend, or not we, but the Federal Reserve would extend that time period and let it float a little bit higher. Okay, a little bit higher to me would be 2.5%. And the Fed did not move. And I remember being in the Fed in the old times with Paul Volcker, and when interest rates were at 18%, how long it took to bring down inflation. And, the Fed was using this word of transitory. I don't know where they came up with that word, but that was 100% wrong. The Fed, to me, and I love the Fed. I was there 40 years. I pride myself as being a long-term officer of the Fed, but I think the Fed was irresponsible, almost to the point of incompetence, for not increasing rates sooner than they have. What he said now about raising rates a quarter of a point, we all know that. There's a 97% probability that in the last 2 months that we're going to raise rates. They should have been doing this. And I strongly believe that a quarter of a point is good to start. But I think in between now and July, there needs to be a 50-point increase, and we need to raise rates at least 1% by July. I truly believe that in order to start curbing inflation.
Hey, Juan, we got to take a quick break. Do you still got a couple of minutes to spend with us?
Sure, absolutely.
Hey, folks, we're going to take a quick break. We're with Juan Del Busto, former head of the Miami Federal Reserve. Still a lot more to talk about. Big impact on your job. Stay with us. Thanks for hanging out. This is Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffman, and we are together with Juan Del Busto, the former head of the Miami Federal Reserve, and me personally, I'm learning a lot here today. Hey, Juan, back to Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve Chair, and his comments about raising a quarter of a point. A quarter of a point, 25 basis points, that's really not going to be much. I mean, if you think about it, it's not really much. It's going to be barely a blip.
Well, it sounds like they want to do something, so he's taking a safe position for himself.
Psychologically, interest rates are going up. Is that going to cool inflation? Probably not. Is it going to be, too little, too late, and all of that? But the question is this: how much does the war in the Ukraine and what's going to happen with energy prices and the uncertainty of the markets and the sell-off and everything else, just what's going on geopolitically in the world right now, very dangerous situation. How much does that come into play?
That comes into play in various things. For example, fuel is going to keep increasing. So we need to curb inflation in the other areas that we can as soon as possible, because spending by individuals is down to, even before the war started, GDP for the first quarter is less, it's about 0.5%. So for an economy to be robust and start moving, we need to have GDP moving at about 3%. So people are not spending. Of course, there was $2.4 trillion in excess savings a few months ago. People, all those free money have stopped. So people have been using their excess savings. So that's why they're going back to work. But one of the parts that inflation is not going to curb, as some people who are retired, they got a 5.9% increase in Social Security, the largest increase in about 30 years. Salaries are going up now exponentially to 5.1% increase. That inflation is going to stay here forever. We're not going to go down from those increases. Where we hopefully do go down is in food. Housing is through the roof all over the country. In Miami, rents are the highest in the country, increased 50.3%. New cars and used cars are through the roof. So we do need to start somewhere. And 1% by July is a drop in the bucket, but it's a good start to start waning down inflation. And that's very, very important for our country and the future of our country.
Well, let me ask you this, Juan. Let me ask you this. Let me just throw this word out there, and then I want to get back to your point anyway, of course. But I'm hearing the word, Neil, you probably hear it, recession. That people are predicting if we go in this mode, we're going to be in it's Jimmy Carter 2.0. We're going to go into a stagflation. We're going to go into a recession. Do you have a feeling for that?
Yes, I absolutely do. With the numbers I looked at for a paper that I was doing approximately 3 weeks ago, unless things change drastically, I see a recession coming by the end of next year. I hope we don't have stagflation. That is the worst thing that could happen to our country. But recession-wise, unless things change drastically, I do see the numbers gearing towards a recession by the end of next year.
So there are a
2023.
few, but there's a few things that we can do. I don't know if we will do them, but there's a few things. I mean, first of all, the United States could be a massive energy exporter.
Yeah,
right?
I was just going to say.
Now,
just wrote
now
that.
we're an
Energy.
importer, and that's ridiculous. And getting our gas prices down here, getting our energy prices down here, we have the key to that. We can do that. We can do it within our own borders. And cars, you say how used cars and cars are up. There's a semiconductor problem and they can't get the
Correct.
chips, but hopefully they'll figure that out. As far as homes, I mean, how in the world are we going to afford homes again? I have a daughter and a son-in-law. They got 2 young kids. They sold a place. They wanted to upgrade into another place. And they can't. They can't because, the prices have gone up so much. They just can't. I mean, it's like ridiculous by the time you see what they pay and then the taxes and everything else. When is that going to change? Can that change? Will that change?
Well, it can change in some places in the country, but in South Florida, the demand is so great for rental properties and any property because of the influx of individuals coming from mainly New York, California, and coming to the state because of the tax situation in the state is very good to come in. So there's no supply. There's no inventory. Like people say, hey, isn't this like the recession of 2008? No, not even close. Because in 2008, we had all kinds of inventory of housing. At this point in time, at least in South Florida, I don't see that. That's why the prices keep going up. Other places in the country where people are leaving, some of those prices might go down, but as long as the demand is there, I don't see that happening in the short term.
And this is going to play right into the midterms that are coming up, and this is going to, it has the great potential to really have a red wave, so to speak, in the House and the Senate, setting us up for 2024. I mean, last time we were like this, we had Ronald Reagan.
Right.
Unfortunately, he's dead. We do have Trump in the wings, and we do have other folks in the wings who can really do a good job. We just got to get there. So, Juan, it looks like, what the Fed does and what you're interpolating for us right now really is a prologue of what may be coming down the pike in about 9 months.
I see that coming.
Hey, Juan, unfortunately, we're out of time. I mean, it's been a wonderful discussion. We really appreciate it. Juan Del Busto, former head of the Miami Federal Reserve. Thanks for coming on the show, Juan.
My pleasure.
Coming up, we have James Taylor. Yes, that's true. James Taylor, president of the Heartland Institute. And we're going to talk about energy prices and what's happening with the U.S. and Russia as it regards to energy. It's a very, very important topic. Stay with us.
Promoting American industry. This is Made in America with Neil Asbury and Rich Rothman.
Welcome back to the show. Absolutely glad that you're here right now. Well, it's a terrific show. I thought we had a great segment with the former head of the Miami Federal Reserve, Juan Del Busto. It was a great conversation. And what's interesting, Neil, that I found to discuss what's going on with rate hikes and so forth, is that energy seems to be touching everything right now, don't you think?
I mean, it is certainly the topic. And, look, we had the State of the Union. It would have been a beautiful time for President Biden to say, look, we're not going to import oil from Russia. We're essentially funding this war. It's crazy. I mean, that would have been bold. That would have been incredible. And
that would have been a reset.
And then he would follow that up with our incredible energy industry that we have. And we're going to backstop Europe. Russia is toast. We don't need Russia. They need us. And by the way, we're also going to ban Aeroflot from American skies as well. But, that was his whole big lead. The lead that would have really made a difference would have been the energy lead. And he blew it. He didn't take it.
Yeah, he doubled down on where he was, and he kept tap dancing.
I kept waiting for that big moment.
I think everyone was waiting for that.
Like the president of Ukraine, when he gave his speech, we just talked about it a moment ago, to the European Union. I mean, that was a big moment. I was waiting for the big moment, and it didn't come.
No, it never happened. And I got to tell you, when you talk to folks out there, and you're talking on Main Street right now, because people are paying $5 a gallon in parts of California, $6 a gallon for premium, $6.60 as a matter of fact. And right here in South Florida, you're paying, what, $3.59 to $3.60 right now for regular. So everyone's being touched by this. And folks are saying, and they're trying to figure this out, and we're going to ask James about it in a second, that why, if we're at war, kind of, by proxy.
Oh, we're at war.
With Russia.
This is really.
I don't want to be accused of saying we're at war with Russia, but yeah, by proxy we are. Through the Ukraine, we're at war. If Robert Ludlow would survive, it would be incredible. Ludlam, rather. But they're saying, why is it that we're relying upon Russia for our energy needs? About 10% of the U.S. energy needs right now. And in the European, Germany, for example, up to 70%. Why is it we were energy free and independent, and now we're not, and we're buying from an enemy? I mean, people are scratching their head and saying, I don't get it. Why is it? So James Taylor, president of the Heartland Institute, what is that all about? How could it be, James, that we're buying oil from our enemy? I don't understand that.
Because Joe Biden is prioritizing climate fantasies over the lives of the Ukrainian people. There is no need for us to be buying oil from Russia, but we are right now sending $74 million every day to Russia for oil imports. To put that in perspective, $74 million a day buys Russia 20 T-14 tanks each and every day that they can then send out against Ukraine, Moldova, whoever else they have next. There's no need to be doing this. Just 2 years ago, under the Trump administration, we were producing more oil and natural gas than we used. We were net energy exporters. Joe Biden decided that's a horrible thing, even though we strived for years to do this. He said that's a horrible thing because oil and natural gas create carbon dioxide emissions, and climate change is the greatest existential threat in the world. Well, now we've learned that it's not. And
well, we found out last week that John Kerry was very concerned that, Putin may take his eye off of climate change. I mean, that was we had that soundbite last week. That was the most amazing soundbite I had heard. Maybe someone should call Putin up and say, we hope you don't take your ball, the eye off the ball right now, because you got to watch that climate change. I want to play a soundbite for you, James. It's President Trump back in 2018 having that one-on-one. We all know it, had a one-on-one with NATO, and he was actually questioning the reliance on Europe for Russian energy while we're trying to protect them from, Russia. Let's take a look at this and we'll get your comment.
Well, I have to say, I think it's very sad when Germany makes a massive oil and gas deal with Russia, where you're supposed to be guarding against Russia, and Germany goes out and pays billions and billions of dollars a year to Russia. So we're protecting Germany, we're protecting France, we're protecting all of these countries. And then numerous of the countries go out and make a pipeline deal with Russia, where they're paying billions of dollars into the coffers of Russia. So we're supposed to protect you against Russia, but they're paying billions of dollars to Russia, and I think that's very inappropriate. And the former chancellor of Germany is the head of the pipeline company that's supplying the gas. Ultimately, Germany will have almost 70% of their country controlled by Russia with natural gas. So you tell me, is that appropriate? Germany is totally controlled by Russia, because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not. And I think it's a very bad thing for NATO, and I don't think it should have happened.
That's an amazing statement, and he was berated for that, James. And then the truth of the matter is he was 100% correct. What do you think?
Yeah, he was correct. And as I mentioned, we're sending so much money to Russia right now that they are turning into military aggression. Europe is sending even more money, and this is something that did not have to happen. If Joe Biden had not reversed Donald Trump's policies and had kept up the encouragement of the export of oil and natural gas to Europe and elsewhere, these other nations also would not be buying Russian oil and funding their military machine. Here's something that most people don't know. About 40% of Russia's budget is funded by their oil and natural gas exports. Forget about sanctions. All we'd have to do is have a world that is buying American oil and natural gas, which we have plenty of, rather than Russian oil and natural gas, and they would not have the money to field an army that they are fielding right now to inflict mass casualties on the people of Ukraine. And this is
James,
yes.
can China step up though? I mean, that void that Russia would have. I mean, can China fill that void? I mean, because China's the wild card here, right? I mean, whatever we do, will they step up and say, "Oh, okay, well, we'll
buy it.
We'll buy it."
Yeah, well, China can to some extent, but they already are. This is something that China would not be able to purchase all of Russia's oil. It's a matter of European countries that are buying from Russia. But also, if America were producing at the level that we have been and that we can be and should be, even if Russia wanted to step up and buy, or China wanted to step up and buy Russian oil, even if all the other nations in the world decided to do so, the price of that oil and natural gas would be much lower. If we're flooding the market with American oil and natural gas, the price is lower. And even that alone, forget about boycotts, even if everyone's buying from Russia, we could cut their revenues in half. 2 years ago, the price of oil was $40 per barrel. Now it's $111. That triples Russia's money to spend on their military.
Well, that's amazing. Well, listen, we're going to be coming up on a break right now. You got a few minutes you can hang around and catch another segment?
Absolutely.
That'd be terrific. We're on the air right now with James Taylor. James, the president of the Heartland Institute. We're talking about energy. And when we come back, we have a couple more sound bites that are pretty cool. But we really want to get James' interpretation of what's going on. It seems like everyone's tap dancing, going after the energy sector of Russia, but no one's actually doing it. So let's find out what happens. Be right back. Welcome back to Made in America. This is Rich Rothman, along with my good friend and co-host, Neil Asbury. And we're talking with James Taylor, yes, James Taylor, president of the Heartland Institute. And we're talking about energy. And we're talking about what everyone's talking about right now and what everyone's paying for. And that's energy prices in the United States, energy prices around the world are just skyrocketing. As a matter of fact, while the president, Neil, was giving his speech the other night, which I suffered listening to,
it was excruciating.
It was just awful. I mean, I felt like going on the second floor and throwing myself down the stairs. It would have been easier. But we're price of oil went up, by a barrel of oil by $4 while the president was speaking. And he was telling everyone it's going to be all right. No, it's not going to be all right. Not going to happen to be all right. Anyway, James Taylor. So tell us, it seems like, as I said before at the break, that everyone's talking about, even Manchin saying we should be doing something. Pelosi this week actually favors banning all Russian oil imports into the United States. But I think there's another side of that's not being reported. Yeah, she's saying she'll do that, which is kind of easy for her to say. But, James, she doesn't really talk about where we're going to find the 600,000 barrels that we're not going to get from Russia on a daily basis. What does that mean?
Yeah, what it means is that the Biden administration understands that if we block Russian oil imports, without lifting the shackles that we've placed on our own energy production and on our imports from Canada, that's going to cause substantial increases in gasoline prices, for which the Biden administration will pay a political price. Look, we can do this. We can put a ban on Russian oil. We just have to do it at the same time that we allow American energy producers to produce oil and natural gas like they're capable of doing. But the Biden administration believes that climate change is so much more important than standing up against funding the Russian war machine, that he's still hesitant, even when Nancy Pelosi says, come on, let's stop funding Putin's war chest. Joe Biden says, I'd rather fund Russia's war chest and take some symbolic stance against climate change than actually stand up for the American consumers and the Ukrainian people.
So James, this is just so insincere, because if we're buying the oil from Russia or we're buying it from Americans, it's still the same fossil fuels, no matter where it's coming from. And so it's not like you're using less. No, you're using the same amount. It's not like you're reducing climate change. It's the same amount. So American regulation and controls over the oil industry and the mining industry and the energy industry as a whole is so much more strict. I mean, and if there is going to be the extraction of fossil fuels, the United States is the much more responsible country to do it. Our technology, our laws, our regulation.
Well, it's cleaner.
It's cleaner.
We have the cleaner product.
So, saying Russia, it's the same ozone over Russia that's over the United States,
because
right?
the air moves. You may notice that. It's cold wind.
It doesn't matter if it's in Russia, the United States, or if it's in India or China. Once you get way up there, it doesn't matter anymore where it comes from. So if you really believe that, the United States would be the much more responsible source for this, and it would be the best outcome for the climate.
Right, absolutely. Replacing Russian oil is something that we can do easily. Joe Biden, though, by putting the shackles on American producers, just a few months ago, he went to OPEC, he went to Russia and said, please increase your production. So if we're going to be utilizing oil and natural gas anyway, why not utilize American oil and natural gas? And as you said, it's very insincere. It's simply so that they can say to the environmental left, so that they won't turn on them. They can say, look what we're doing. We're shutting down fossil fuel production. At the same time, we're begging our enemies.
Isn't that it, though, James? Right there, they're deathly scared of the radical left.
That's totally controlled.
He's
totally
scared. He just will not do anything to go against their will. He's so scared. This whole thing with Build Back Better, he didn't say Build Back Better, but he just laid it out and said, okay, here's all the things that we should do. So basically, it's not going to happen. Why did you waste all the time to do that? But it's because of the radical left. He has to do that. He's so scared of the radical left. But he's losing all the independents. He's losing even the Democrats. He's losing the Democrats. He's losing the working class. He's losing everybody for this very, very vocal, small minority of people. Why? Why does he do that?
Yeah, well, he's making a political calculation at the expense of the American people. Let's just hope our nation survives until November of 2022 and then November of 2024. The fact of the matter is, as the Biden administration admits, when they beg Russia and OPEC to increase oil production, we're going to be utilizing it. So why not boost our economy and produce it here rather than sending it to Russia? And by the way, if we were to switch over to wind and solar power, which would crush our economy, we'd be even more dependent on hostile nations, because the wind turbines and the solar panels absolutely need rare earth elements that are produced almost entirely in China. Now, if you think that it's hard right now for us as a nation to be dependent on a hostile nation in Russia for our energy.
And James Taylor, president of the Heartland Institute, it has been spectacular having you on the show. Thanks for coming back. We appreciate it.
Hey, thank you very much.
Okay, Neil and I are going to be right back with some really interesting ideas that you want to listen to, and a pretty funny soundbite.
Welcome to Made in America. This is Neil Asbury together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. We're having a lot of fun here today, folks. I know the topics are very complex and sometimes very disheartening, but it's important we talk about these things and share thoughts, and we all learn so much from listening to each other. We've had some wonderful guests on today. Rich.
We all learned something from Juan, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's very intriguing.
And James from the Heartland Institute, and what's going on in the energy segment, and not being relied upon or not relying upon hostile nations, and we know where that always ends up. That's not good. But we said we're going to talk about the State of the Union when we open the show, and talk a little bit more about it. But one of the things that the president, after kind of beating up the majority of the country for about 50 minutes, he did pivot, and he wanted to get into this unifying message, for after, for most of the speech was disunifying. It wasn't a unifying message, disunifying. And then he went into COVID, right, about COVID, and it's not a partisan issue. It has been a partisan issue because they made it a partisan issue. I mean, that was a huge part of their whole thing with the campaign in 2020 was to divide the nation over COVID and to continuously beat up the president, Trump in this regards, about the vaccine. We're not going to take that vaccine. It's the Trump vaccine. I'm never going to take that vaccine. Mm-hmm. They made it political. Now they get elected, then everybody's going to take the vaccine. And the other thing that was complete, you talk about insincere, we just talked about insincere a moment ago, was the whole dropping of the mask mandate just prior to the State of the
Hours
Union.
before.
Just prior. Now, here it was that follow the science, we're not yet ready to do that, not ready to do that. They know they're getting their butts kicked right now in every poll that's out there, even the own polls that they manipulate. They're still getting their butts kicked. And they know this is a major losing message. And so they needed to kind of show the American people that, we're kind of back to normal. Well, they're the ones who are preventing us from going back to normal. Even the blue states right now, as fast as they can, are dropping restrictions, like every restriction.
Well, they have no choice.
Vaccine cards.
They have no choice. The numbers are out there, and they're losing.
Vaccine cards are like the thing of the past, right? I mean, nobody's talking about that, not even in the most liberal studies. Let's listen to President Biden, then your comments after this. President Biden at State of the Union talking about COVID.
It's time for America to get back to work and fill our great downtowns again with people. People working from home can feel safe and begin to return to their offices. We're doing that here in the federal government. The vast majority of federal workers will once again work in person. Our schools are open. Let's keep it that way. Let's use this moment to reset. So stop looking at COVID as a partisan dividing line.
It's time.
What a hypocrite.
It was time 2 years ago.
Yeah, what a hypocrite. I mean, let's open up and get people back downtown, as de Blasio is telling people, don't come, you're not wanted, you can't have a life in New York anymore. As the president is saying, listen, I know that we have all this money invested in you as a Navy SEAL, but if you didn't take that shot, if you didn't get the jab, you're fired.
How about the healthcare workers? These brave people that during
the frontliners,
the frontline people, and now they don't get a shot, then they're fired, and then they're fired. Now all of a sudden, hours before, literally minutes before you get into the State of the Union, then COVID seems to what COVID?
Well, wait a minute. What about the fact that he put up a fence around the congressional building, the Congress, before the State of the Union, because they thought, all heck was going to break loose because of those who were really upset because they were diminished. Wait a minute. Who are the people that came up with the idea that you're non-essential? Talk about job creation. How could you be non-essential? Awful.
Well, Rich, we're going to go from the president's State of the Union. We're going to go to Senator Kennedy, the great senator from the great state of Louisiana, at CPAC just recently. Listen to what the senator said.
There's one more thing I believe. I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. I don't hate anybody. I look for grace wherever I can find it. There's always something on God's green earth for us to be thankful for. I believe that love is the answer. I do. I believe that love is the answer. But you ought to own a handgun just in case.
Well, isn't that a state?
I think that sums
state
it
of
up pretty
affairs,
good.
but it says pretty well. We don't have time left, but it was the president who said, fund the police, fund the police, fund the police. After years of like burning our cities down,
destroying the police,
and crime like crazy, like historic highs. Now it's fund the police. Absolutely hypocritical. But anyway, Rich, we're out of time, but we're going to be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.